meeting for the Wausau School District Education Operations Committee. Our first order of business will be to approve the minutes from the meeting of August 23rd. So I will seek a motion to approve minutes of the August 23rd meeting, August 23rd, 2021.
So moved. Second.
First and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Item 3, public comment. Thank you so much. Okay, we do have a number of folks signed up to speak tonight, and I will just quickly remind everyone some of the things that we went over last week. First and foremost, I don't know what all of the topics will be, but please, whatever your views are on any of the topics, please keep them to yourselves. We don't want anyone to feel intimidated or like they shouldn't be. I guess intimidated is probably the right word. So please keep all of your comments, utteration, whatever it is, to yourself. Second is that each speaker is limited to 3 minutes, and we will have to stick to the 3 minutes. As soon as Cassie holds up the card that says time, you will be asked to stop and let the next speaker go. There's been some discussion over people asking for taking extra seconds during their speaking time and playing favorites, so we're not going to do that as a result of those questions. 3 minutes, everyone is going to be done regardless of where you are with your commentary. And as always, anything that individuals say here during public comment they are personally responsible for any commentary that may be seen as slanderous or defaming in any way. So, with that said, let's start. Our first speaker we have tonight is Odessa. I'm sorry, I should have said to you, please state your name and address so we can have it on record. Thank you.
Hello, good?
Yeah.
Alright, awesome. My name's Odessa Arce, and then would you like me to restate my address?
Please.
W11499 West Town Hall, Gresham, Wisconsin. Kulamase, Nidushinzi, Odessa Arce, Ninunjai, Shauna, Wisconsin. Nimahikinawe, Manamni, Wak, Puerto Rican. Hello, my name is Odessa Arce. I'm from Shauna, Wisconsin, and I am enrolled Stockbridge. I am a nominee, and I am also Puerto Rican. I am a Shauna School District student at Shauna Community High School, and I am enlightened to hear that there has been an incident at the middle school here. An indigenous misconception is what I am to hear. I just want to say that not only can the teacher learn from this, but so can all of we. We need to teach better culturally and teach better about Native American culture. At my high school, I sent out a survey, and not even 50% of the teachers in my high school knew what tribal sovereignty was. So this is not only an issue in your district, but probably all over Wisconsin. In U.S. history, my freshman year, we spent less than a week learning about Native American culture, whereas we spent a little over a month learning about the Holocaust. So just to put in perspective how long we spent on learning about Native American culture, not to take away from either or. We must understand that Native Americans have a unique background, and some students may have a harder time succeeding in school because of who they are and their background and where they come from. And then for teachers to not teach about their culture and not acknowledge it, it can be even more difficult for those students to succeed. So that's why it's important to teach culturally, not only their culture, but culturally, and understanding that they have suffered generational and historical trauma, and that has led them to have sometimes numerous issues. So not only, I just like to bring up the holiday Thanksgiving because I feel that there are a number of schools that still have kids dress up as Pilgrim and Indians. And having them do that and then having Native American students see that could set them up to be ashamed of their culture or not recognize it for what it is. And it's important that all students they feel that they can express themselves in their learning environment. Teachers also, I feel, must learn more about Native American culture from the time that they're in grade school through higher education, because a lot of times, in my personal experience, when history teachers get in front of the classroom, they lack confidence in teaching about the topic, and then that leads to the domino effect where there are other issues. I also just want to say that I do not believe the teacher intended any harm, but I think it's a great opportunity for everybody to learn.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, our next speaker is Karina.
Hi, my name is Karina Thundercloud. I'm from Black River Falls, Wisconsin. I'm a District 1 legislator, which covers Marathon County at this time. So I would like to say at this time that I'm outraged. But somehow I feel that that would imply that I'm surprised, and I'm not. I am ashamed. First, for the teacher who decided to dress and act like an American Indian as if it were another act at a circus. Second, for myself and my colleagues, present and past, in that we obviously haven't educated our friends enough to know that modern-day blackface isn't proper. Dressing up as you'd think an Indian would isn't educational, it's racist. American Indian children have, since the inception of boarding schools, been subject to harsh penalty, including death, for looking, acting, or speaking like an Indian. The historical trauma is passed on through our current students, some attending this very school and in that very classroom. Their grandparents weren't taught their language because they feared violence. This generation is now resurrecting languages that were nearly lost. Some are learning their own culture and traditions against the threat of vanishing resources like the imperiled black ash trees. They're renegotiating our relationships with the world around us. They don't need our cynicism or our apologies. They need our support and our encouragement. We hope that our teachers, our school districts, and our communities do better for our children. As a Ho-Chunk Nation District 1 representative, I invite district leadership and staff to a conversation about the history and about how we can be better role models for all of our children. Thank you.
Thank you. Next on the list, we have Alton. Sunny? Hold on.
My name is Alton, Sunny Smart. C'est bonjour, je m'appelle Dwayne Magadi Dug. Nino za wana kwa nijika na wasa se du dam. Ikiduwen minwa nungum. Nino za wana kwa. I'd like to just say a few words. I'm a retired professor from UW Stevens Point, where I taught in the sociology department and social work department for 30 years. And taught a lot of courses in cultural diversity, working with tribal families, diverse families, teaching about cultural competency, teaching about how to work with different tribal groups as well as diverse populations. So we take a look at, what is diversity. But what I wanted to address too was the picture I saw in the paper when we talk about perception, and perception is the biggest part of communication. People see something, and from that they perceive what it is, and what it looks like. And then from there they go on to try to fill in the gaps. A lot of times those are stereotypes. And the stereotypes that many people don't have is the ignorant, sort of the background information about groups. So what they pick up is from the media or whatever else that is around them. And a lot of times, many times that's not real appropriate. or they add things, and so they hear things, and so they start using those types of perceptions as well as terminology. And so when you have a perception like that, children see that. And from there, from that perception, they start taking on sort of an idea about who this particular group are or how they should look. And so when you have individuals that sometimes think that they're helping, but actually they haven't really checked with the individuals who they're trying to help. They don't ask those individuals. Well, marginalized groups, as has happened over and over, we have people who are experts who decide that this is what we think is best for this group of people. And from that, they make their decisions rather than really asking the individual groups who they're talking about to really ask them about what is appropriate, what's not appropriate, or bring those individuals in. And so I think it's moving on the institution, for example, the Wausau School District, with the individual, maybe he decided that's what he thought was appropriate. But you can see the perception that other children will see that as appropriate, and maybe they will follow the mark and do the same thing too. So we have to address these things very quickly and educate, and that's the primary role that I'm here is about the education, to say a few words to the school board, about looking at what's going on within their school and to be able to address that. And if you don't know, then those things happen. They'll continue happening. So really, to have a forum like this where people are to express what's going on gives you the opportunity to be able to hear, from indigenous people about what their perceptions about who their people are. As a couple of speakers have mentioned, a lot of historical things have happened through generations, through no fault of their own, just through government policy. Very marginalized people. Children start to get marginalized, they start to see their culture being marginalized, and then themselves.
Sir, I'm sorry, the 3 minutes is up.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, next on the list we have Bruce Grau.
I'm Bruce Grau, 1115 North 10th Street. When I worked as a nursing manager, I performed employee evaluations that determined raises. The criteria was clear, quantifiable, and relevant to the priorities of our mission to serve people by providing high-quality health care and customer satisfaction. Tonight, we, the public, for whom you serve, will be asked to vote on a raise for you. It's a reflection of your success in meeting the needs of the students, parents, teachers, staff, and community as clearly stated through the survey process and public comment. How effective have you been at addressing the priorities of this mission? Number one, parents and staff have strongly stated priority one is to address the needs of struggling and marginalized students, not the state-of-the-art ego-stroking sports complexes. Number two, parents, staff, and community health experts have called for a proactive, proven effective mask mandate, not a reactive COVID welcoming matrix that follows the misguided concept that one can have a pool with a no peeing section. COVID doesn't jump out of a textbook. Number three, since 1989, the state of Wisconsin has required Native American culture sessions to be taught in all 3 levels in school. This has yet to be fully realized here in Wausau, resulting in actions that are disrespectful and harmful to Native children directly and all children in general. When such racist actions occur, the administrative response has been anemic and deflecting, not commanding in support of racial and social justice. Number 4, parents of marginalized students yearn for connection with school and to optimize their children's academic success. Yet effective measures of communication and engagement continue to be discussed a lot with little action implemented. In summary, you have exceeded standards in maintaining business as usual, prioritizing stadium size, self-aggrandizement, and continued academic success for the talented 10th. You have not met standards in responding to the stated needs of parents, staff, and the community. You exhibit a lack of understanding that when marginalized students are supported, everyone benefits. You engage in criminal negligence with your cavalier approach to an uncommonly deadly virus, showing an inability to guarantee the basic requirement of a safe learning environment. As your manager, I would have to recommend remediation and reflection, not an increase in remuneration. Thank you.
Thank you. Just a clarification, there is no raise being requested. I'm sorry, to keep it to yourselves.
What?
There's no raise being requested for school board tonight. Thank you. Next on the list, we have Jackson Seeger?
Hello, my name is Jackson Seeger. My address is 1200 South 50th Avenue, apartment 8 in Wausau. I'm here tonight to talk about the racist incident that happened within a classroom in our district. I want to say that I'm extremely disappointed in how this situation has been handled thus far. I'm here today as an ally, as an outraged ally. I'm here to ask that you take action, as an apology without physical actions and changes is just word. I also want to remind you and everyone here that just because the actions of said staff member don't affect you, this doesn't mean it's not your problem. Lastly, I want to say that I find it concerning that this exact presentation has been used for the past 16 years, and the staff and board of this district seem completely okay and seem to think that it's appropriate. Not only this, but the fact that a student had to find the courage to say something, really, when you know better, you do better. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Dylan Prescott.
My name is Dylan Prescott. I come to you as a community member, a father, a grandfather, a brother, and also a good friend. And also I've lived here for over 30 years. My name is Dylan Prescott. Once again, I come from the Ho-Chunk and Potawatomi nations. But I come to you to talk right through my heart and who I am as a parent, and also as I educate my children in my culture, and also our lives throughout how we live in this world that we live in now. I come to you to let you know as personally who I am. I'm a parent. You look at this young man right here. You tell him about that woman. You tell him that that was right, that she could tell my son about our culture. You tell him that it was okay, because I'm not gonna. I raised my children as a proud Native American man. I raised my children spiritually, culturally, humbly. And you up there, your parents, your grandparents, your fathers, your mothers, all of you up there, use your heart. Don't use this what we're doing here. Think about us as Native American people. We're hurt. Something like this is serious to our people. This ain't no laughing matter. Here I only get 3 minutes. That woman was given a whole hour to talk that about us. Wearing this garbage. I come to you right here. I am not wearing colored busted feathers. I'm not wearing all of that Halloween garment in front of you. I come here as a parent, a concerned parent, a community member. I come to you as also a cultural and also spiritual advisor of our people. This is no laughing matter. This thing right here is racism. And you as parents should know that. And this woman, if she's a parent, she should have known better. She's a teacher. She should have been educated in this. She should have been educated in our culture, educated in everyone's culture that we have here. Asians, Native Americans, Caucasians, whoever live here. We need to live together. This is Wausau. You guys need to know this. Your parents sitting up here, your grandparents. How would you like it if someone came and talked about your culture like that? You would not like it. You would feel sad for your children. My son is sitting up here. He had to see that. He had to hear this. He wanted to come here. He wanted to be here for this. He's going to be going to school here in Wausau. My children came to school here. My children went to Wausau East. My children went to Wausau West. I'm a cultural educator within the school district, and whoever this woman is, I haven't seen or talked to her in the past 10 years. And if she knew what she was going to do, she don't know me. So she should learn, she should know. This is racism.
Thank you, Mr. Prescott. Next on the list, we have Barbara Manson.
Seg, Skanakagoga. My name is Barbara Munson, and I'm a woman of the Oneida Nation. I chair the Indian Mascot and Logo Task Force for Wisconsin Indian Education Association. So, and I've chaired it since 1997, when we really felt we needed it, because the suicide rate among American Indians was 8 times the national average. And stereotyping was one of the things that we, as Indigenous people, had identified as being harmful to ourselves when we were growing up and harmful to our children. And that's why we created the task force in the first place. So what has been said here by Dylan and others about how serious this issue is, it is very serious. And the American Indian Studies program, Act 31 of 1989, is a very powerful remedy to it. However, it hasn't been evenly done throughout the state of Wisconsin. There are a few model programs. You will find somewhere in your papers a letter from Wisconsin Indian Education Association encouraging you to help make Wausau into one of those model programs and offering support from Wisconsin Indian educators and as a vehicle to help, along with the Department of Public Instruction's American Indian Studies consultant, to help develop a model program here in Wausau. And that is as it should be, because Wausau is centrally located. You are within 2 hours of any of Wisconsin tribes. And who better to work in partnership with to develop a really exemplary program. I look forward to seeing that happen. I myself experienced a lot of stereotyping when I was a child, and I have a son who has testified in hearings for legislation in Madison to a suicide attempt. I am aware of many families throughout the state who have experienced that tragedy. And we want to see that change. So we're just really very serious about this, and we want to work in partnership with you. Yamako.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. Okay, next speaker, we have Tricia Zunker.
My name is Tricia Zunker. My address is 1404 Golf Club Road, Ho-Chunk Rashka Hinik Bihingade. My Ho-Chunk name is Good Woman. I'm here today to address Act 31. Last week's incident at Wausau West reveals the need to audit and strengthen the entire Indigenous Studies curriculum in this district. It's not just because of the racist and discriminatory action of putting on a costume to portray another race of people. It's because of the content that was taught as well. I've seen some of the homework in that class. There is a question about shaman and Wisconsin Ojibwe Indians. Do you know why this is such a problem? You need to teach about Wisconsin's 11 federally recognized tribes accurately and respectfully, and in a way that complies with Act 31, as is your legal obligation. There is no shortage of resources out there to assist. Not only that, but the district response minimized the action. The original press release referenced, quote, culturally sensitive concerns, end quote. Racism should not be minimized as a concern. It's a real issue, indeed a public health crisis, that must be addressed tangibly and swiftly. Then the district issued a response that shared an announcement made with the class that witnessed this egregious conduct. That response stated, quote, in an effort to create a fun learning environment, end quote, essentially justifying the racist conduct to students in the name of fun. What about the students that witnessed this last year or the years prior? How are you addressing it with them? Further, that response never actually explained why what happened was a problem. Here's why it was a problem. Race-based mascots, nicknames, and imagery, and indeed costumes, only result in negative consequences and further stereotype Native people. It is never good educational policy to stereotype against an entire race of people. This is not a matter of public opinion, or a personal opinion, sorry. This is based on peer-reviewed, credible research. The research shows that use of race-based mascots, nicknames, and imagery result in a detrimental effect on all students' educational experiences, exacerbate cross-community conflict, and create a hostile learning environment for Native students, which has lifelong consequences. Last week's conduct happened. The question is, what are you going to do about it? I am calling on this board and district administration to make concrete changes to the Indigenous Studies curriculum by doing the following. Number one, engage David O'Connor, Director of American Indian Studies Program at DPI, for help strengthening the curriculum. Number two, engage tribal leadership for direction and assistance with curriculum improvement. Number three, engage Wisconsin Indian Education Association for assistance. Number four, hire a diversity, equity, and inclusion director, because these instances continue to happen, and it is high time we have one of these individuals in the administration. Finally, it's clear too many people don't understand why this is problematic, so I urge the board, administration, and staff to complete implicit bias training. Please address this publicly and transparently with everybody. I hope to see this on your next agenda. I hope to see an update by email, a press release, and information posted on the website, what you will be doing concretely and tangibly to respond to this. Pinigigi.
Next, we have Penny Lemire Smart.
Good afternoon. My name is Penny Lemire Smart. I reside at 168093 River Road in Ringgold, Wisconsin, in the East River School District. And I greet you today with great respect, all the board members, and also members of the audience and relatives here. I was disappointed in the teaching incident that was reported that resulted in a stereotype of a Native indigenous person. There are members in our audience and community that are resources that can be utilized in the education of students with regard to indigenous people and cultures. I request that in the future, our people are called upon to assist. We have 11 tribes plus other tribal members in Wisconsin and in the community, and I think they should be used as resources in your education. Thank you.
Next on the list, we have Tanya Campbell.
Hi, thank you. My name is LaTanya Campbell, 808 North 2nd Avenue in Wausau, Wisconsin. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I don't have anything prepared today, but I wanted to make a statement. I too was disheartened by the comments and by the incident that happened at Wausau West. I come to you not as an Indigenous woman, but definitely as an ally, as a Black woman and a mother of 4 children who attended Wausau East and Wausau West. On Friday, I participated in a panel discussion of youth of color who were talking about some incidents that they've experienced in the Wausau School District. Incidents of stereotypes, racism, racist jokes and slurs. The youth were between the ages of 18 and 22. And as they're making these statements, they're crying, they're shaking. They had to console one another. And this is just a 4 to 5 year period since they've graduated, and they're still experiencing that trauma. Race-based trauma is real. Stereotyping, whether it's from peers or staff, it has detrimental effects on the youth lifelong. It's going to change how they view any system that they have to navigate in. I encourage you, to utilize the resources that were made available to you tonight, some of the call to action that Tricia presented. Use this as a learning opportunity, a challenge to do better. This is constructive feedback, and use it as such. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Next on the list, we have Mr. Cone, Greg Johnson.
Bonjour. My name's Greg Johnson. I'm a Lackawanna tribal member, and my address is 1185 Occowansy Drive, Minocqua, Wisconsin. So that was my son who made that discovery about your employee. And I've always taught my children to speak up and say things when you see our people being made fun of or whatever. And he's a new student here. He's only been here a couple months, and he was already subject to not only that, but a few other comments from the teacher and homework assignments that weren't really in his favor. So last year, during spearing season, I was shot at by a man by the name of Jim Kelsey. And so me and my crew were out on the lake. We were harvesting, utilizing our treaty rights. And the first thing I thought of when my son sent me that image was him getting shot at up the road. So that's how that relates. The guy who shot at me obviously wasn't educated about us. So something to think about. Miigwech.
Miigwech.
Next on the list, Phyllis Smith? Smoke, I'm sorry.
Good evening. My name is Phyllis Smoke, and I'm a District 1 legislator for the Ho-Chunk Nation. I represent the Marathon County, and I'm here tonight. I don't have no speech prepared, but I did hear about what happened, and I feel really disheartened that this happened, and I felt it was important to be here to support the families in this area and to educate the school board. And I really hope that each one of you have heard and listened to what is being said here tonight. Each of you were given a packet of information. Can you put your packet up to make sure you've gotten it, that I know you have it? Thank you. That is information from the Ho-Chunk Nation, and there's contact information in there. So when you get a chance, take a look at that information. If you have any questions, to contact us. I think it's really important that We get these educators, these resources into the school, and if you feel like reaching out to us, we are here to help you educate your teachers in the school and get the appropriate cultural awareness that needs to be out there. We don't need this inappropriateness happening. Thank you.
And the last speaker is Alexandria Salinas.
Bonjour, my name is Alexandria Salinas. My Anishinaabe Noswan is Anungokwe, which means star woman. I'm from Grand Rapids, Michigan. I'm both Potawatomi and Odawa, and I reside currently in Wausau or Lac du Flambeau, Wisconsin. I am the partner of Biskakane Greg Johnson, and together we have a son, Asiganak, who is here. He is here by my side doing this as he is everything we do in life, because that's our main method of teaching. Our children are with us in everything. That's our cultural way. I love Cohen so deeply and so greatly, and he brought these concerns forth to his dad because he knew immediately it was wrong, because he was raised in a way to see these things, to be proud of his culture. Many kids don't have that privilege. Many of our children are being raised away from the teachings as to the effects of the boarding school generation that aimed to strip our people of any cultural identity. So my immediate response when I saw what happened was, well, that's exactly why I don't want my son in the school system. That's exactly why right there. But I do have hope, knowing that there are millions of children in the public school system, that things can change, that they don't have to be this way. And I was disheartened when I learned that many of the faculty even didn't fully understand why this was a problem, why this was an issue. And it's a real issue because things have been set up from the start with colonization to erase our ways and our culture. So anytime that you portray our people as a cartoon or as something pan-Indian instead of the specific, beautiful, varied cultures that they are, it's problematic and harmful because it's taking away seeing them as alive and strong and beautiful today. It's shifting the mindset to being cartoon characters and something that doesn't matter and doesn't have to be taken seriously. And the age of ignorance as an excuse is over. You know, we all have access to the whole world at our fingertips on our phones. We have access to anything that we want to know. Unfortunately, some of these kids, these high school kids, have seen the posts and had responses publicly calling Cohen different names and having words to say about the situation, including the word snowflake and it's too sensitive, it's just dressing up, it's not a big issue. And I would ask and plead that as administration, you would educate these kids about why this is an issue. Don't let it just be an apology and smooth over it and try to make things better for the future, but you have a duty to explain to these kids why it was a problem to begin with, because they're just regurgitating, trying to defend their kids, trying to defend their teachers, which is a great thing, but it's being passed down. When that happened to Greg, I was pregnant with our son, and that worry carries on every single day. I've lived in New York City and Sydney, Australia. I've lived all over the country, all over the world, and I've never experienced racism like I have in the North Woods of Wisconsin. So please, I urge you to do better and be better. Miigwech.
Thank you to everyone tonight who spoke. Okay, next on the agenda, community engagement. Ms. White has something to share.
Good evening, board members. I just have a very brief update for you tonight about our community engagement process, which I brought forth to you during our meeting last month. Our survey, our facilities survey, as I talked about, is now available for residents within the Wausau community to take. It is accessible by going to wsdsurvey.org. Beginning tomorrow, we will market that survey. We'll put it on our Facebook and Instagram platforms, our website, and send a mass notification to our families as well to take it. That survey will be open until October 15th. We are also sending a postcard to our families that will arrive around October 1st, notifying them about the survey and informing them how they can access it. So as we talked about, the survey is an important piece in the community engagement sessions that we will hold starting next month. A lot of the responses we will get will frame up those discussions. So we have gone ahead and scheduled 2 of those community engagement sessions. There will be one Thursday, October 28th, and Monday, November 8th from 5 to 6 p.m. right here in the John Muir Middle School auditorium. So that is really the brief update that I have for you. At this time, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Okay. Thank you. Questions on the survey for Ms. White?
So these community engagement sessions, will you go closer to the mic pad or bring it closer to you? Thank you. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Much better. Okay. So the community engagement sessions, will there be a sign-in sheet for people who attend?
We haven't discussed that, but that's something we could look at doing.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay.
And will there be an agenda for the community sessions?
We can talk about having an agenda. A lot of it will be based on what the survey reveals, so we haven't talked specifically yet about how the framework will be for those community engagement sessions, but that's certainly something we can look at as well.
Okay. And then the community survey, what was the date that it ends on? October 19th?
October 15th is the last day that it's open.
Okay. And so when will we get a presentation on that survey?
So when the survey closes on the 15th, we'll need about a week or 2 to process the data. So as soon as the next meeting is held after that point, we would have an update on what that data shows.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thanks. Any other questions?
I just had one. Who is all eligible, remind me, to take this survey?
So we're sending it to district residents, but we'll also notify our families who have opened enrolled in the district as well to notify them to take it because their feedback would be important too.
Okay, so you don't have to have children in the district, just have to be a resident of the district.
Correct.
Great.
Oh, employees also. Thank you, Bob.
Okay. Any other questions? All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, our final item on the EdOps agenda tonight is the policy 0167.3, public comment. I'm bringing forward a potential addition to the policy for consideration by the rest of the board based on legal counsel's advice regarding our compliance with Wisconsin open meetings law. Just a little bit of background and regarding kind of where this has come from. The practice of having board members sign up and speak during public comment began, I think it was a couple of years ago, after another local official did it in their particular governing body. There have been, I'm sorry, was there a comment?
Yes, it always has been.
Okay. Members of the public have recently raised concern over the school board allowing this particular practice to happen. Thus, I sought out our legal counsel's input in terms of are we or are we not compliant with open meetings laws by allowing that practice to happen. I do want to address one concern from the outlet. It was, from the outset, it was alleged that this procedure represents an effort to silence a board member's voice. The specific quote that started the last communication was, I'm speaking today despite the board hiring an attorney to find a strategy to silence me, only to find out that they can't because they can't take away someone's First Amendment rights. Nothing could be further from the truth. The specific question asked to the attorney under the title of Open Meetings Law and Public Comment was, can a member of the school board introduce a new subject at a meeting that is not on the board agenda, aka the public meeting notice, by participating in the meeting's public comment period and introducing the new subject at that time? Legal counsel advised that the answer is no, and provided some rationale as to why that is. It violates, the legal counsel advised that it violates Wisconsin open meetings law for board members to participate directly as speakers during the period of public comment. Our counsel's opinion is consistent with the opinion of the Wisconsin League of Municipalities, as well as guidance received from the Attorney General's office. The Attorney General is the state official responsible for interpreting and enforcing open meetings laws, and accordingly is the most appropriate source for us to follow in order to comply with the law. This particular policy only applies to periods of public comment. It has nothing to do with any other expression of an individual's views on any topic. For example, we know that we have some board members who use different social media platforms to express their views. There's lots of content available out there that has fallen into that category. And furthermore, the policy is only concerned with one portion of the meeting, and that's presented only because the law requires this approach for the portion of our meetings that have public comment. Consequently, board members can certainly express their ideas orally or in writing through almost any means or any number of platforms, so as to not be confused with that this policy is trying to prevent a board member from speaking out on issues that concern them, because again, we have plenty of examples where that certainly happens. The encouragement that I would have for the board to consider the additional language that I will share in a second is that this really is an important component of our overall open meetings law. We continue to try and I think go above and beyond in many cases to be compliant, and it's equally important that we protect board members who do not want other board members speaking during a period of public comment and do not want to bear the legal responsibility for those board members who do. Also, this policy assures that our media partners are engaged and that we are taking and making serious efforts to examine and re-examine our open meetings law procedures to make sure that they have proper notice of items that board members will be discussing. A couple other salient points to mention here is that individual board members do not have authority to make open meetings law compliance decisions for the district, but this is effectively what's happening with the practice that has been going on right now. This is important, this is completely content neutral. It has nothing to do with anybody's point of view on a specific topic. Thirdly, open meetings law compliance is critically important and shows our commitment to open government. And again, our media partners should have confidence that we periodically make adjustments in our procedures in order to comply with our open meetings laws. We should not reject this out of hand and certainly should instead consider it another mechanism for complying with the open meetings law. The language that would be proposed.
And why was that language not included in our packet?
The language was just completed today.
And why I asked twice in an email that I sent and then resent asking what the topic was, why did you not reply to me?
Why what?
Why did you not reply to my email when I asked you if this was the topic?
Maybe I did not see your email. My apologies. I work full time.
Yeah. And that's the problem. The problem that I choose to speak in public comment is because now that we are the minority, we don't have a voice on this board anymore. We ask to have things put on the agenda and it is ignored. That never happened in the past. And if I had been given proper notice, I could have contacted an attorney myself.
You can absolutely do that. This is by no means a final decision. We know that. This is what we do. We discuss these items in open session. There is no final action. In fact, this was only listed as possible action. If there is no interest in pursuing this, there's no interest in pursuing it. But regardless, you are more than welcome to bring back your legal opinions, present that to the board, and then the board can decide for itself whether or not they want to pursue this and move forward with the language.
I find this really awful. I know the legislatures do this. They publicly testify. I don't see any harm in it. Is there any case law that covers this?
I'm not certain what the legislatures do. I just know that the Wausau School District's legal counsel has reviewed this with the Attorney General's language and rulings that they have done. We can find some of that information as well and have that ready for the next meeting when you bring yours forth as well. So I guess we can open it up for discussion, before we do any formal review or anything or action on the item. And again, there doesn't have to be action. This is meant to start the conversation on the topic and gauge interest on the part of the board. If people feel that it's worthy of it, then let's talk about it further. If not, then it's not.
Mr. President, would you read your wording just for the audience, because they don't have a handout of what we have in front of us?
That's a good suggestion as well. Thank you. Board members are to be advised that the board prohibits its members from participating as speakers during a period of public comment because doing so violates Wisconsin open meetings law. A board member who participates as a speaker during a period of public comment does so at his or her own peril under the law and without the endorsement of the board members or the board as a whole. In addition, any statements made by a board member participating as a speaker during a period of public comment do not necessarily represent the position of the board's members or the board as a whole and shall in no event be deemed binding on the board.
But that's already true. All that is already true. When someone makes public comment, it is they themselves. They do not represent anyone other than themselves. And all this is true.
Correct. But when you're sitting here and when you at the roll call say, I'm here for a meeting, when they ask for the board members to announce their presence, and you say, I'm here, you're announcing your presence as a board member.
Exactly.
So the premise of the law is that you can't play both roles. You can have one or you can have the other, but you can't play both.
That makes sense.
Is the way that it was explained to me.
So, Mr. President, this language it doesn't say that you can't give public comment. I think it more kind of points to the liability.
Correct. Yeah, there's going to be no, I wouldn't envision this to be any type of a restraining action. If someone so chooses to continue to do this or do this for the first time, this is just a formalization of the fact that the board and the board members acknowledge that they do so under their own or at their own risk or peril, whatever word you want to use. And should an official complaint be filed about a violation of the open meetings law, that you do not have the quote-unquote protection of being a board member at that point.
Mr. President, as far as agenda topics go, each board member up here has the ability to call a motion to have a certain thing put on an agenda that the board could then vote on.
Correct.
Mr. President, it seems that the board member does have the opportunity to speak on those issues then directly, regardless, and express their own personal point of view in a board discussion around something that's agendized.
Correct.
I just have a question for you, Mr. President. So this first sentence here, board members are to be advised that the board prohibits its members from participating as speakers during a period of public comment because doing so violates Wisconsin's open meetings law. So before you were saying that board members were able to make public comment, but at their own peril. correct? That's what I believe you said?
The fact that it violates the open meetings law is not a new, what's the word I'm looking for? It's not there's no new kind of law or regulation against it. This has always been into effect, or been in effect, at least back to 2004, I believe. All this is doing is formalizing that we have a policy, or that we added this wording to the policy. It does not prevent someone from continuing to do so. Everyone just goes on notice that doing so, you are at risk. It doesn't change anything, perhaps, Ms. Lowe. It's just a formalization of what exists out there today. Should a complaint be filed by anyone, then everyone is aware of how that, how the board would react to said complaint.
I don't think that board members participating in public comment violates Wisconsin's open meetings law. I mean, because I've seen it happen before. I've seen in other local government where board members did step up to the microphone during public comment, and those board members have been allowed to do so. So I've seen it before, and there hasn't been a violation, on those local government boards. But I guess I just wanted to tell everyone, I've witnessed it before, just not here. So.
And actually, that is a good point, Ms. Lowe. And the analogy that was used back was something to the effect of, just because someone was going 75 miles an hour in a 55 mile an hour zone and never got a ticket doesn't mean that it wasn't always against the law.
Yeah, I get that. I understand that. Okay, thank you. I would like to motion that for our next meeting, we see the language where the public comment of a board member violates Wisconsin's open meetings law. I would like to see that. Where do we violate that? I would like to see that at the next meeting. So that's my motion for our next meeting. I'd like to see that language. And in addition to my motion, second part of my motion is I would like to see the legal counsel, what their advice was to us at our next meeting as well.
I'll second it.
I understand the second part is quite easy. Can you explain what language you're asking to see?
The language in the Wisconsin's open meetings law, where we're violating that.
Okay. So, can the probably make sense for the attorney to refer us to the section of the open meetings law?
Right.
I think that would make sense to support whatever his opinion is.
Right, and he's offered support or in whatever form of action we may need.
Just a question, very quick one. Have we had an open meeting complaint at this point in time, by any chance?
I am not aware, no one has made me aware as board president of an official complaint. There's, you hear various comments in the community. I don't know what is true or what isn't true, but no, I have not received anything formally sitting here today. I don't know if others have heard anything or have not, but.
One thing, well, I think it's good to get that information before we decide, but one thing we might want to consider is maybe removing the part that just says absolutely that because doing so violates the Wisconsin open meetings law, so we don't have to have a debate about whether it does or it doesn't. It makes sense to me that it does, just in the sense that, and I haven't looked into this personally, but if the open meeting law prevents us from discussing something not noticed, it doesn't seem like we would be able to get around that by having all of us sign up on the public meeting or public comment section and all discuss it. I mean, we've never done that, of course, but doesn't seem like we would be able to get around the open meetings law by all signing up and making our comments during the public comment section without giving notice to anyone that we were going to do that. So it makes sense that that would be a violation, but if it's not 100% clear, if there isn't a case, like Todd mentioned, if there isn't a specific case on it, then maybe we want to avoid specifically saying that it is a violation of the...
And I can see where it would be a violation if we all agreed that we were going to do that to get around the...
But I mean, you also can't just say that, you know, the first person who gets here gets to speak and then nobody else gets to sign up and comment against them either, though. You know what I mean? Like, if I got here first and signed up and made a comment, and then John wanted to comment against me, so then he signs up to comment too, talk to the counterpoint, and then Cody says, well, I want to make a comment as well. It doesn't mean that we planned it ahead of time, but we're basically having a discussion that something that isn't on the agenda. It'd be different if it was on the agenda, it would also be pointless because we could just talk about it later during the agenda part.
Right.
But if that were to happen, you would see that when it's all signed up and you could say, we'll put this on the agenda for the next time.
If more than one person signed up?
Yeah.
The fact that we closed down the signups, you know, that does help limit that. But.
Sorry.
Nope.
I don't mean to interrupt
Yeah.
the discussion,
So-
but we are noticed to start the annual meeting.
Yep.
Can you talk
Yeah,
about
absolutely.
table this and pick it back up after?
Sounds like a good idea.
Yes, certainly, and we do have, and I don't know that we need an official motion, but there's a request for more information specifically on the language that outlines what the violation is and also on the legal counsel's advice/position as to why it would be a violation. And I'm also trying to get a copy of, I don't know if I'll be able to, but my understanding is that the other governing body within our area that had this same situation, they also sought legal counsel and it came back with the same opinion that it was against an open meetings law, and thus that apparently that practice had stopped within that body. But I'm trying to get that information, so I can bring that to, if I happen to get it for the next time.
Yeah, that'd be good.
Okay.
But until there's case law, you're going to have attorneys on both sides of this issue.
My only interest is making sure that this board is in compliance with those laws. What happens after that, we're done. Okay.
We do have to vote because we
Yeah,
didn't get
I
a
do have
first
a,
and second.
Correct.
right, I do have a motion. And I would like a roll call vote too. Thank you.
Okay, so seeking a roll call vote on Ms. Lowe's motion that we review specific language on the open meetings laws relative to the violations thereof, and also we get our legal counsel's advice/position statement as to why having a board member comment during public comment is in fact a violation. We have a first and a second. Roll call vote.
Jim Boucher,
Yes.
John Creasher,
Yes.
Kyle Lowe,
Yes.
Cody Nicolai,
Yes.
Jane Rouge,
Yes.
Lance Strala,
Yes.
Karen Vandenberg,
Yes.
Lee Webster,
Yes.
Pat McKee.
Yes,
9-0.
thank you. I'm now seeking a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. We are adjourned. All right. Do we need a break, or are we good jumping right into the annual meeting? Okay, let's see here. What time is it? All right, it is 6:04 p.m. on Monday, September 27th. I would like to call to order the annual school district meeting and budget hearing of the Wausau School District. If we would stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, first order of business. I am seeking, we're going to open nominations for the election of a chairperson for the annual meetings. Are there
I nominate Mr. McKee to operate as chairperson.
Second.
Okay, we have a first and a second. Are there any nominations from the floor? Okay. Hearing none, we have a motion to nominate myself to be the chairperson for the annual meeting. We have a first and a second. All those in favor?
First, you gotta close.
Oh, I'm sorry. Seek a motion. I need a, seeking a motion to close nominations.
So moved. Second.
All in favor of closing? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. We are closed. All right. Now we're going to vote on the motion to have Pat McKee as chairperson for the annual meeting. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, next we have to designate a secretary for the minutes. I will say the chair designates Cassie Peck as secretary for this annual meeting. The chair also designates Cassie Peck and Bob Test to assist in the voting process and to tally votes at this meeting if necessary. The 28th annual meeting minutes that are included in the handout materials will be entered into the record. We do not need a motion or a vote on that. At this time, we are down to item number F. Treasurer Lance Trollope will now read the treasurer's report, which includes the general checking account for the school district.
This would be for fiscal year ending June 30th, 2021, as of June 30th, 2021. Beginning cash balance and investments, July 1st, 2020, $32,427,408.57. Receipts, $119,209,431.89. Disbursements, $118,213,082.19. Ending cash balance and investments, June 30th of 2021, $33,423,758.27. This includes Fund 10, Fund 21, Fund 27, Fund 29, Fund 50, and Fund 80.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Trollope. Noel Tortson will now read the other post-employment benefits report.
This is the other post-employment benefits report for the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2021. It does not include liabilities or receivables. Cash balance in the OPEB trust account for June 30th, 2021 was $5,484,365.12. Investment returns July 1st, 2020 to June 30th, 2021 were $607,240.47, included dividends, unrealized gains and losses, long-term realized gains and losses, and fees. Total claims disbursements for July 1st, 2020 to June 30th, 2021 were $1,451,401.07. Are there any questions?
Any questions, Mr. Tortson? Thank you. Okay, we will now have the budget hearing, the proposed 2021-2022 budget. Mr. Tess.
Thank you. Board members, if you can follow along on your iPad, you're going to have a hard time seeing the screens that are up here right now. So I'm on the screen right now that it's welcoming you to the annual meeting and budget hearing. And I want to remind people, first of all, I should probably introduce myself. My name is Bob Tess. I'm the Chief Finance and Business Services Officer for the district. And this is the portion of the annual meeting that represents the budget hearing. I want to tell you enough about the district budget to get you familiar with it, but it is by all means just a summary. We can't spend an evening and talk about a $140 million budget and really do it justice. So we do include a summary booklet in the board packet. I also want to take this opportunity to remind you that this is a series of events that starts in December in public session in front of the board, and many events in these milestones that you're going to see in a little while, the board will vote on while participating in open session. So the annual meeting is a small part of this process, albeit a very important part of this process, because this is where people get to vote on a few things that go into our budget. Of course, all of our decisions with the budget and otherwise are driven by our shared key interests, so I want to take an opportunity to at least have it on the screen and remind you what those 8 shared key interests are. This is the budget calendar I was speaking of a second ago. Every one of these milestones that happens in open session, the board gets a chance to discuss, vote on many of them. The one in red right now is the one we're in the midst of, September 27th. We're in the middle of the annual meeting, not to be confused with the last event before the budget is finalized. The budget gets finalized about a month from now when we learn all kinds of critical data that the DPI is developing right now. So we need to take one more crack at this at the end of October before we can set the budget and establish the levy. No discussion of the budget or school finance would be complete without talking about the revenue limit first. The revenue limit gets a lot of attention. Sometimes when we talk about large numbers like $140 million in budget, it doesn't make as much sense to people until we boil it down to per pupil spending. Per pupil spending, we'll see smaller dollar amounts that we can process a little bit more easily. But you'll see on the top the revenue limit, which gets a lot of attention in the state of Wisconsin. That governs how much money we have to spend. Part of it comes from general state aid. Part of it we ask the taxpayers to fund. Together they make up the revenue limit. The dollar amounts for our particular case, the revenue limit per student is about $11,676 for every single student. We receive aid in the amount of about $7,405. About 63% of the amount of money we spend in our revenue limit comes from the state. Now that's taxpayer money too, but it kind of takes the sting out of it when the whole state is funding that part of our operations. 37% comes from the local taxpayers, 4227. This is always a fun slide for me, not so much for anybody else. The revenue limit is a perpetual math problem that goes on year after year after year after year. And it starts with the number 10,614 per student. We add some exemptions per student. Those are transfer of service costs to get to be $12, $10,626 per student. And then normally, the state legislature adds a per student amount. Didn't happen this year. Not happening next year. The state legislature is increasing the revenue limit 0 for 2 years in a row. That means no new money. So I'm still at 10,626. Carry that down to the lower left. We add to it in the middle on the bottom. One of the big parts of that number, 10,050, is the April 21 referendum that our district voters passed. The district voters said increase that revenue limit by about $500 per student. In aggregate, it's $4 million. We're pretty familiar with that number by now. $4 million revenue limit increase. There's also an increase in there for energy efficiency work to pay off the debt for energy efficiency work. And it gets a little bit tricky also for declining enrollment. When your enrollment goes down, as it is expected to this year, because we're talking about 3-year rolling averages, we get an exemption from that. We get protection from our enrollment going down. If we think back to last year, when our enrollment went down dramatically, we did not come to you and say we have to cut staff, we have to cut programming, we have to cut budget, because we were offered that protection. Works both ways. This year, when we're starting to recover with more enrollment coming our way, we're not going to see the benefit of all of that enrollment because we were protected against it last year. Here's just a slide that shows the history of our increase in revenue from 2006-07. It used to be pretty steep. and then in 2010 it flattened out considerably, and it's starting to come back, but probably the most notable increase is the last year, and most of that was due to the referendum that we passed in April 21. It's also broken down. The dark color is per pupil categorical aid. The light color is per pupil revenue limit. That's a legislative decision. Every 2 years they pass a budget. Sometimes they add to one of them, sometimes they add to the other one, sometimes they add to both of them. This year and next year, they added to neither one of them. Our voters added to the revenue limit on their own, in spite of what the legislature approved. During the next month, the following factors impacting the final budget will be revealed. That's why we're going to have another crack at this in the end of October. The final district staffing plan is still being developed. A month into the school year, it's still being fine-tuned, and we're still hiring people. We'll have a better idea of what that is. We roll that staffing plan in about October 15th. Certified district property value. We make pretty good assumptions on the property value with the district, but we don't find that out until October. State equalization aid and the final certification of that aid. One thing that the legislature did do is they added to the aid. But we all know too well that if you add to the aid but don't increase the revenue limit, that's no more spendable money. But the aid should go up. Third Friday pupil count has already been conducted, but by the time it's made formal and official and the DPI gets the numbers back to us, that'll be another few weeks. Wisconsin Parental Choice Program vouchers, we talk about that a lot in the end of October when we see the budget for the last time, because those numbers aren't revealed until October. We fund all those private school vouchers in our district. It doesn't take away from our budget necessarily, but we do have to tax for them and send that money to Madison. Here's just a visual of what has happened with some of the increases in funding over the last several years. The top represents the revenue limit change each year since 2007. The bottom represents the per pupil categorical aid since 2006-07. You'll see some years the revenue limit increased, but the categorical aid didn't. You'll see some years where both of them increased. Not too often do you see years when neither are increased. If we look at one, of course, 2011-12, that one's pretty notorious, a decrease of $578 per student. But the only other time both of them were zero was 2015-16, where neither a revenue limit increase happened or a per pupil categorical aid increase happened. And it happened in 2015-16, and now this biennium represents that happening twice. Of course, we'll talk a little bit later about what is different now. Large amounts of ESSER federal funding that perhaps the state is expecting us to use for operational reasons instead of pandemic recovery necessarily. Top is just called equalized funding. The bottom is called foundational funding. The top just means it's based on the relative wealth of any given school district. The bottom, foundational, everybody gets it. This is a slide you have seen before. The mill rate really isn't decided by this governing body here in front of us. It's decided in combination by this governing body and also the Department of Revenue. The Department of Revenue tells us whatever we levy. In the case of the city of Wausau, the city of Wausau is going to get 58.3% of that bill. The Department of Revenue tells us that. The town of Berlin, 1.82%. Hewitt, 1.27%. Rib Mountain, 20.95%. That's not a decision we make. The Department of Revenue tells us that. And if we look at last year's numbers, I think we saw this a month ago. Last year, the city of Wausau got 61% of our entire tax bill. This year, they only get 58.3% of our tax bill. Could people in the city of Wausau be happy about their taxes? Perhaps. Although individual assessment practices differ within the city, so that's not even a guarantee. Well, if somebody went down, somebody else probably went up. Take a look at, I guess, town of Wausau. Last year, 2.9% of our tax bill. This year, they get 3.13% of our tax bill. If we reveal the rest of this slide, you'll also notice the amount of tax that we're proposing right now is lower by 1.02% from last year. So let that sink in for a second. We passed a referendum for $4 million in additional revenue. There's state aid on that $4 million. There's some other factors that changed underneath, but we're taxing less. Not a smaller mill rate, but a lesser amount. We're taxing 1% less this year in spite of that successful referendum last April. And that's exactly what we said we were going to do when we proposed both referendum questions. We said we can do both of these and not increase taxes. We passed one of them, we dropped taxes, and we're also using defeasance, which is prepayment of debt, to keep our taxes very, very flat. More to follow on that in a little bit. This is a picture I love to look at. You probably get confused by it, but if you've been on the board for a little while, maybe you're used to seeing it. The red amounts are the local contributions, in other words, from the taxpayers. The first $1,000 of per student spending, taxpayers fund 26 locally, 74% from the state. The next $9,000, 35% locally, 65% from the state. Everything above that, 78% locally, 22% from the state. That's important, always, but more important now than ever because we're talking about a referendum perhaps again. And that top 78, 22% suggests that every additional dollar that we spend, we get 22% of that dollar funded by the state government. So if we're talking about spending $150 million in bonds with a $10 million or $15 million annual payment, 22% of that is covered by state aid increases. So I thought about getting rid of this slide, but now's not the year to get rid of this slide. It's too important. The position that our little star is up there, the Wausau School District, that's called Positive Tertiary Aided Fund. This just shows the rest of the state is kind of with us, right? The green is positive tertiary aided. The purple in far northern Wisconsin, they get no aid. They're too property wealthy per student. The light purple, little aid, you get the point. The darker the green, the more aid they get. The rest of the state is kind of with us there. Similar to this one. We're aided at about 66%. Much of the rest of the state is also aided at about 66%. This is another statewide map. This suggests that we're decreasing in enrollment, but it suggests most of the state is decreasing in enrollment. There are some dark purples that are decreasing more than we are. We're light purple, so we are in declining enrollment, not unlike much of the rest of the state. Mentioned a thing or two already about our April 21 referendum for $4 million. This is just a representation of what we're doing with that $4 million. It was primarily intended to increase or provide for pupil services teams at every one of our buildings. The full staffing plan hasn't been realized yet for that, so that price for the staffing for pupil service will increase gradually over the next several years. The $4 million doesn't increase, that's $4 million right from the start. So the balance is used for replacement of capital items, just like we talked about last April. Classroom display units, some other classroom equipment, buildings and grounds equipment. Some of these capital items that if we borrowed referendum money and paid back over 20 years, people would be critical of us. Right? We don't borrow 20-year money to buy a 5-year vehicle, for example. And we were up front with that when we passed this referendum, and that's exactly what we're doing. As the pupil service costs increase over time, the capital replacement items will decrease over time. And also there are some immediate operational needs in red. Some of our budgets have increased modestly. Off the top of my head, I think the HR department increased a little bit. The pupil services department increased a little bit. Activities directors at the high schools increased a little bit. I think that might be it for the red. We're going to be talking a lot publicly about ESSER funding over the next probably 3 years. There are 3 categories of ESSER funding. ESSER 1, ESSER 2 come with it a lot less compliance, a lot less rules, but also much less dollar amount. ESSER 1, which has to run out about a year from now, is about $1.2 million in federal money that comes through the DPI to us. ESSER 2, which has to run out about 2 years from now, is an additional $4.6 million. ESSER 3, which is the big one that comes with all the rules and the large dollar amount, and the performance period is extended through 9/30/24, 3 years from now, $10.5 million. All of it together, about $16.5 million to be used over the next several years. Now, if we're going to indeed use this for pandemic recovery and pandemic planning and improving instruction and professional development, much of that should be spent early in those 3 years. So this iceberg profile shows just that. You'll see in 2021, the year that just passed, we did spend a little bit of the ESSER 1 allocation. During 21-22, this year, we're spending quite a bit more. The largest expenditure in our ESSER expenses will hit this year. The following year it'll go down a little bit. The following year it will go down even more. 24-25, a little bit will be left. 25-26, ESSER must be all expended. Categories, the biggest one up there is personnel. We've talked often about that. We're a little bit nervous about spending that kind of money on personnel, but we do have a plan. That set of personnel costs will have a sunset, I guess you would call it, in 25-26. So we only brought to you personnel costs that we know we could shut off after a few years, or during the next few years look for an alternative source of funding. But those are our 2 choices, because we can't use ESSER funds to fund those personnel costs anymore. Professional development's a big chunk of it, and of course classroom curriculum supplies and curriculum equipment, and some technology and a little bit of buildings and grounds. Much more detailed are the subsequent slides. This one is all of our personnel. You will have seen all of these before. The bold ones on top were part of the reconciliation plan. The lighter ones on the bottom were a separate motion that was taken around June probably for some special ed positions. These are all the personnel costs that we're building into ESSER. The bright green just means we're still in the process of doing all the other ones with the DPI. So the DPI hasn't approved the other ones yet, but with staffing, because this is a reimbursable grant, we have to spend the money first. We'll ask for reimbursement. We'll get them all to turn bright green in a little while. Operations and technology, some of these are smaller dollar amounts, so there are many of them, but technology in particular and operations, these are the proposed expenditures for ESSER, each of the next 5 years. Heavy this year. Curriculum and classroom equipment. We know that curriculum materials are very expensive from discussions we've had in the past. It's not uncommon to spend $200,000, $300,000, $400,000 on curriculum, $500,000 on curriculum. It's a big district. We're able to get some of those curriculum expenses funded with ESSER funds, thus protecting maybe some of our other funds and also using it for pandemic recovery. Buildings and grounds, we saw the handrails personally a couple of weeks ago, right? The handrails at Wausau West, they used to be wood and they weren't very sanitary, and the finish was rubbing off from repeated sanitization and washing, and we replaced them with the brushed stainless that you saw a couple weeks ago. Dust collectors at Muir, custodial equipment replacement, HVAC modification at Riverview, and switch to MERV filters. And I think the small dollar amount in that buildings and grounds category also is kind of a testimonial to how well we do in that area. in keeping our buildings and grounds pretty updated with these types of things. Air circulation, sanitary surroundings, and things like that. Professional development, there's always a need for professional development, probably never more so than now on the heels of the pandemic. And getting all of our staff professionally developed in a variety of ways to prepare for a slightly different type of learning is something we're engaged in that bottom area. ESSER 3 does have some compliance bullets that need to be met. 20% of all LEA funds or school district funds must be used to address learning loss through evidence-based instructional strategies. 80% of ESSER 3 funds must be used to safely reopen schools. More to follow on this. Develop and publicly post the safe return to in-person instruction and continuity of services plan. We're in the middle of doing that already. Develop a plan for ESSER 3 funds based on local stakeholder engagement. We continue to do that. Ensure maintenance of equity to high poverty schools. That's a check that the DPI is going to do to make sure that we're not diverting funds to some of our wealthier schools. This we'll get a chance to vote on later in the voting portion of the annual meeting. The last year numbers are on top. This year's numbers are on the bottom. You will see some pretty significant changes. The one that jumps out to me, deductible receipts, went from 8.3 million to 10.6 million. That's because of ESSER. You'll also notice that property tax went from 31.1 million to 32.6 million. Much of that is due to the referendum that was successful in April. Overall revenue amount went from 107 million to 112 million. Of course, that went up as well. The expenditure side, last year is on top, this year is on the bottom. Percentage-wise, we are spending a little bit less than we typically do on salary and benefits. Much of that has to do with the ESSER spending. Okay, some of it also has to do with that referendum spending on capital replacements. We're spending a large chunk of that $4 million on capital replacements, which is, of course, not salary and benefits. Net expenditure increase did go up $4.2 million. Here's just a sampling of some of the grants that we have secured for the coming year. $7 million in grants in Fund 10, $3.5 million in grants in Fund 27. Even if you do have a $140 million budget, $10 million is nothing to sneeze at. Those are significant dollar amounts. This is a compliance portion of the slideshow. We need to report out every year on how our energy efficiency exemption projects have been doing. This is phase 2. The payoff is 8.8 years of return on investment, 10-year performance period that is soon to be finished. And 2024 is the last time we have to levy for that debt that we took on for phase 2 of our energy efficiency projects of about $10 million. This one's phase 3. The ROI, the payoff is a little bit longer. It's 12 years because we tackled all the low-hanging fruit the first phase. Second phase, not quite as quick of a payoff. This one is done and retired the debt, $10 million of it in 2026. So when this debt retires in 2024 and this debt, sorry board, I'm saying this and this, realizing that you're looking at your iPad. When phase 2 is retired in 2024 and phase 3 is retired in 2026, any subsequent referendum and the debt repayment would wrap itself around that, with that in mind. So there's not an irregular profile. The Community Service Fund, or Fund 80, is something we levy for each year. We have an obligation to tell you what we're levying for. Growing Great Minds program, G2M, before and after school program, most notably the Kids on the Grow Community Connection and Family University Network. That's a before and after school program that we do fund through Fund 80, which means it's accessible to the entire community. Same thing with the planetarium at Wausau West. It's accessible to the entire community, so that allows us to fund it with a Fund 80 levy. On the next page, the School Resource Officer Program, 4 school resource officers that we split costs with the city. That is a community benefit, and we fund that through Fund 80, or our community service levy. We started that, I believe, last year, or the year before that. I think last year we started that. And as well as the maintenance on buildings and grounds, a part FTE used to keep up our outdoor facilities that are used by the community throughout the summer. Here's the Community Service Fund budget, along with the $662,200 that we levy. That's the same exact levy as we had last year, so we didn't change any of the Fund 80 programming. We do have a little bit of a fund balance in Fund 80 that we're going to need as grants start to disappear and we get back to normal. I can't pass up an opportunity to show this slide. This slide shows how flat our mill rate has been over the last several years, including passage of a referendum in 2015 and passage of another referendum in April 2021. In spite of that, we've kept our mill rate relatively flat during that time. Here's a comparison of last year's levy in comparison to this year's levy. The final levy, $47,481,497, is actually down about $500,000 from last year. And we achieved that by changing the debt retirement levy by prepaying just enough of our future debt to keep the mill rate at $10.29. That was the target. We wanted $10.29 to be the same mill rate as it was last year. We achieved that target, and in doing so, because our property value went down, our levy also went down about $500,000. The bottom is just the same thing in terms of the mill rate instead of the dollar amount. Here's a table that you probably saw a couple of months ago when we talked about the fluctuations in the mill rate. The mill rate went from 10.29 to 10.29, but that doesn't mean there weren't fluctuations in between. Here are some things that are all going to change still. We don't know exactly what that revenue limit is going to be until October. We don't know exactly what the equalization aid increase from the state is going to be till October. We don't know what the property values exactly are going to be until October. And we certainly don't know the increase. I've got the word increase in there because I've seen how this has gone the last few years. Increase in private school vouchers, we don't know what that's going to be until October. But as all of those things that are highlighted right now change, we've got the one that's highlighted in green, the defeasance of prior referendum debt. That's that last variable that we can change almost as we see fit to achieve that $10.29 mill rate. And that's one of the benefits that we talk about when we talk about prepaying referendum debt or defeasing debt. We've got that last variable that we can fill in to hit a target mill rate while saving taxpayers literally millions of dollars in interest payments. And this year, that defeasance amount is about $11.5 million. We're prepaying $11.5 million. It's also worth noting that opportunity starts to go away after this year. After we prepay $11.5 million this year, if that's the final number, it might fluctuate a little bit, we only have about a $5 million opportunity left. The budget book is available on our website. It's also available in board book for this meeting. I also want to thank Noel Tordson sitting here right to my right. He had a huge hand in developing some of this. Jen Bonke in my office also played a big role in developing some of this budget. I can't take credit for all of this. They do a phenomenal job, so I want to thank them as well. And with that, that's the end of my prepared remarks. I'll answer questions from anybody.
Thank you, Bob. Questions?
I just think it's important to know why we didn't get any extra money this year and why we are not getting any next year. On the night of the election, Speaker Robin Vos, because his candidate did not win, announced that there would be no money for education.
Any questions?
No, other than just my annual yearly comment for those watching. We've gone over this all year long, so don't be surprised if we don't have a lot of questions about it. And that's a good thing. I'm glad we go over it all year long.
We thank you, Bob, for doing that for us, because to chew on something like this all at once would be almost an impossibility. But your progressive way of approaching it is greatly appreciated.
Thank you. The pleasure is all mine. I'm an educator deep down inside, and that's just what we do, right?
Well, the fact that after 10 years I can speak somewhat, I don't even want to say intelligently because it doesn't go that far.
Well, somewhat.
I can use the terms that are thrown around, and when we get Chuck Krieger up here from, look at that, I remember the auditor's name. That's a problem for me. But anyways, when we get him up here, the work that you said, that goes into it, we know that yourself and Noel and your whole office is heads down on this stuff, not just for tonight, but throughout the year. And frankly, much appreciation for explaining this in ways that laymen such as myself can understand and at least be able to respond to constituents when we get questions about various topics. May not know all the details, but I think we're armed with enough information where we can appear competent. So,
Thank you. And my door's always open if you have further questions that you're not comfortable answering right here. We can.
You got some spare spreadsheets we could review at times?
Love looking at spreadsheets, right? I'll develop one if I need to. So, thank you.
All right. There's no more questions or comments for Bob. We will move on to old business, and there is no old business. We will now move on to new business, which includes a series of 8 resolutions that we do annually to cover certain categories of expenses. So I will go through these one at a time, and we will be voting on each of these independently. Okay? All right, so the first resolution, I would be seeking a motion for the amount of $32,655,024 to be adopted as the tax levy for the general fund and $662,200 for the community service fund for the 2021-2022 school fiscal year.
So move.
Second.
We have a first and a second. Any questions? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. The next item, seeking a motion for the amount of $14,164,273 be adopted as the tax levy for the debt service fund for the 2021-2022 school fiscal year.
So moved.
Second.
First and a second, any questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. School lunches. Seeking a motion to furnish school lunches to the students of the school district and appropriate funds for that purpose. The school lunch program is self-funded through sales of tickets and federal and state subsidies and is accounted for in Fund 50.
So moved.
Second.
First and a second, any questions? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. All right, the next item, reimbursement of expenses for school board members.
I move to authorize the payment of actual and necessary expenses of a school board member when traveling in the performance of duties.
We have a first and a second. Any questions? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next item, a resolution for salaries of school board members.
I move that school board annual salaries be established at $3,100 for the 2021-2022 school fiscal year.
First and a second, any questions?
Yes, I believe you owe an apology to one of our speakers, Mr. Grau, when you snapped at him that salaries for the board were not up tonight.
I disagree, there was no snapping. I corrected him that there wasn't a raise.
Well, it was a
That was on the
possibility of
agenda.
a raise, and you were quite terse.
Any questions?
Can we make it clear, are we all voting if we decide to be voters?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Motion carries. Next item, seeking a resolution regarding continuing authorization for the board to lease suitable lands and land for school sites pursuant to section 120.10 sub 5 of the Wisconsin statutes, that the Board of Education be granted authority through the time of the next annual meeting to lease suitable buildings and or land for school sites.
So moved.
Second. First and a second, any questions?
Does the school currently have property that they are leasing in anticipation
Oh, Mr. Tess?
I think the question was about additional lease space? We're not anticipating any additional lease space. I don't know the square footage on the Thomas Street property, but that's the only one that comes to mind. Pure program. Yeah, small building on Thomas Street.
Okay. All right, if no other questions, we have a first and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries. Number 7, seeking a resolution regarding continuing authorization for the board to convey partial interests in real estate pursuant to section 120.10 sub 12 of the Wisconsin statutes, that the Board of Education be granted authority through the time of the next annual meeting to convey small parcels and or easements in school lands to governmental authorities or public utilities under circumstances in which belonging to the school district is not needed for school purposes, and in which the value consideration to be received in exchange for an easement does not exceed $20,000.
So moved. Second.
First and a second, any questions? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. And the final one, establishing the 2022 annual meeting. Looking for a resolution pursuant to statute 120.08 sub 1 sub a, authorize the Board of Education to establish a date and time of the 2022 annual meeting.
So moved.
Second. We have a first and a second. Any questions? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Okay.
Just one point, the first slide, the first motion that you made, President McKee had the exact right number, but the wrong number was up on the screen, and I'll put the right one in board book by tomorrow morning. It's 32 million, as you read it, and as the motion was passed, 32,885 something or another.
We'll take your word on it.
So nothing.
$32,665,024. It was
Okay.
read correctly, motion was passed correctly. The document in board book is incorrect, it'll be corrected soon.
Wonderful. Thank you for that. Okay, I will now seek a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. We are adjourned. Right there.